Hey, just a quick note to let you know that this video is a pre-recorded live event. If you'd like to join our upcoming events, such as demos and office hours, you can check out our schedule on our support page. Hope you find this video helpful and look forward to seeing you in our next event. So hello and welcome. This is our first demo here in 2023. So I am Jason Wark. I'm an animal welfare scientist at Lincoln Park Zoo and product manager for the ZooMonitor app. And with our first demo of the year here, I really wanted to kind of bring it back to basics for ZooMonitor, a demo I should have probably done maybe a little bit before this point. So really with this demo today, I want to kind of go over getting started with ZooMonitor. And specifically what I was going to walk through, I have a new account I created for our demo, and I'm going to walk through basically sort of those first steps that you would do when you have a new account. So a little bit of account management, and we're going to walk into creating a new project, and then looking at what that looks like when you're recording data in the app. Just as a disclaimer, this video is going to be a little bit longer because I am going to be walking through a few more steps there. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and jump in. Okay, so if you've registered for ZooMonitor, you will be getting a Getting Started email. So hopefully you've seen that. That Getting Started email has your license key, and it has your information, your admin information, username and password to sign into admin. So we are going to start all the way back here with our ZooMonitor website here. So ZooMonitor is a web app. So it runs through your web browser. If you're using a PC, I would recommend using Google Chrome. That's what we test on there, and that's really the only browser we can really support with our small team. If you're using any iOS device, like an iPad, for that you would be using Apple Safari. And so to sign in, you would be going to our zoomonitor.org website. You'd click sign in there at the top, and we're going to enter our license key for our account right here. And if you are using an iOS device, you'll be prompted on this screen here too, you'll notice, to install it as a web app. So just follow those instructions if you're using an iOS device there. So this is the start screen here of our app. And so from here, you can go into the app or you can log into admin. Before we do either of those things, though, I wanted to give a quick overview here of this tour. So if you are completely new to ZooMonitor, I would recommend maybe checking this out first. We have some different screens here kind of showing just at a very high level what you can do in ZooMonitor, some of the different features, some of the different functions in the app. So to get us started, we are going to just jump straight into admin. And the account I created for us today is Jason's Pygmy Hippo Extravaganza, something you should know about me. I love pygmy hippos. And if I'm going to create my own zoo, it's definitely going to be Jason's Pygmy Hippo Extravaganza. For our password, I'm going to be safe, and I'm going to copy and paste it right from the email that I got. If you do type it and you're getting a message saying that it's the incorrect password, please try copying and pasting it too. Sometimes, I have retyped the password and been certain I got it right, and then I copy and paste it, and then it lets me in. So you can have some minor typos and not even notice. And you can also do the forgot password on that screen as well. So here I am, I've signed into admin. If you are signing into admin for the very first time here, you're not going to actually see this screen. So the screen that you are going to see is going to look like this here. So you're going to get a message. You're going to immediately be in your account management section on your account details tab here, and you're going to get a message that billing information is required. So I wanted to show this really quick, just in full transparency, and explain this really quickly. So all accounts basically need to have billing information entered, and that's a requirement of our third-party payment processor, Stripe. Even those accredited organization accounts that are on the free plan, you will not be billed if you are an accredited zoo, aquarium, museum, or sanctuary on that plan. But we do need to have that credit card information in there for how the payment processor works. So you would just go to enter billing information, enter a credit card there, and then you'll get a message there saying that you will not be billed, and you'll see that you're on the free plan if you are part of one of those accredited organizations. I've already entered that in here, so you can see that we started here on the projects tab. But let's jump down to account management here. And so this is the screen. You can see the subscription plan for me. I put us as an accredited. My Pygmy Hippo Extravaganza is accredited by AZA. I'm very proud of that. And we are on the free plan. And so the first thing I want to do here is change my password. So you'll see when you get the password emailed to you, it's a default generic random alphanumeric password. So that's generally the first thing a lot of people want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and edit my profile here. I'm going to change my password to something a little bit easier to remember. And then you can see here with your admin privileges when I'm editing that, there's a few different types of admin. So automatically by default, the person that creates the account is the super admin. You can create additional super admins for your account to manage if you'd like, or you can restrict access to certain aspects of ZooMonitor with the admin credentials here. And then you can even specify that even further through what sections of admin they have access to. So just to kind of walk through each of them, super admins basically have the ability to change organizational information, create other admins, edit admins, and delete the account. So really major actions that the admin might take there. If you have, you want to add somebody to your account, but you don't necessarily need them to have those privileges. You don't want them creating other admins to give people access into your account. You can create an admin here, and then you can limit your management of different areas here. So you can see you can limit their access to the data analytics if you'd like. That would limit their ability to either see reports or not see your reports. Data exporting. So if you don't want them to be able to export your data, but you do want them to be able to create projects, you can do that by just unchecking this one here. And then subscription management, you can also restrict their access to edit that payment information that I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to keep myself here as a super admin. Go ahead and hit save. And then I'm going to create another admin to help me manage this account. And I'm going to add Tasha Weirzel. That's our ZooMonitor research assistant at Lincoln Park Zoo. That is not really her email, obviously, but if you need to contact her, you can always email me. Admin privileges. So I have here, I'm going to make her an admin, and I'm going to give her access to these, but I'm not going to give her access to payment information. Okay, and so you can see here, we have our two admins, so I'm already in there, and then we've also added Tasha. And so the admin users, these are people that can access your admin area naturally. There is another user profile in ZooMonitor, which I'm going to cover now, which is observers. So observers are people that can sign into your app, but don't have a password, username and password to log into your admin. So they can record data for you, but then they wouldn't be able to sign into your admin area. If you want to give a person access to both, like for instance, you can see my name listed here, I can obviously access my admin area, and I can also log into the app and record data during our observations. So you'll see my name listed here. And so we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna also create an observer profile for Tasha. So this is important if you had a situation where you want to give people access to record data, but you don't want them to really have any access to any aspect of admin. So in a lot of cases, like for us at Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago, we have our volunteers record our behavior data. They all have observer profiles, but they would not have admin user profiles. However, we might have, interns joining us or students that are with us kind of for a longer time period. We might give them admin user access so they can create projects for themselves, but then, restrict their ability to export data from other projects and maybe generate reports. So you can really kind of tailor your access and credentials based on the user you have. Okay, so we've created a new admin, we've created an observer, we've changed the password. The last thing I'm going to do here in account management is I'm going to update our logo. So you can see down here for my Jason's Pygmy Hippo Extravaganza, I really wish I created a good logo for us today. Unfortunately, I'm going to be boring, and it's going to be an offshoot of our beautiful Lincoln Park Zoo logo here. There we go. Okay, so now I have our Lincoln Park Zoo logo added there. Once you add the logo, you can go ahead and hit save. You don't necessarily need to add your logo, but certainly there's a few places it'll show up through your ZooMonitor experience, so it's kind of nice to add it. Okay, so we've done a few of those things there. Now let's jump into and create our first project. Before I do that though, I wanted to give a quick overview of the difference between projects and surveys here. So projects are studies that you'll create that use standardized sampling methods in ZooMonitor. So thinking about the different sampling methods of instantaneous point sampling, if you're familiar with that, we call that interval sampling in ZooMonitor. Continuous recording, if you're looking to record duration, any of those types of recording studies where you're recording behavior through kind of a long period of time, maybe a couple minutes, that would be a project. A survey is a little bit different. So a survey is a single time point assessment. Usually think things like body condition or coat quality. So you're making a qualitative rating of some characteristic of an animal there. And so that's the difference kind of between surveys and projects. We'll say most of what we use ZooMonitor for is the projects. And you can see by default, there's a few example projects already created in here with lions, pygmy hippos, and red river hogs. You can certainly explore those in the app or here in admin. And so we're going to create our own pygmy hippo project because we have our pygmy hippo extravaganza. So I'm going to create a 1-minute project here. Yeah, should be good. You can add a description field here, basically to show up in the app, just as a little text blurb there describing what this project is. For our subjects, if you click this drop down, you'll see there's already a few subjects that'll be in your account by default. So we have a few lions here, a few pygmy hippos, and a few red river hogs. So those are part of those example projects that I mentioned earlier. Annie is our current pygmy hippo, so I will add in Annie to the project. However, how we left Lincoln Park Zoo, and we have a new pygmy hippo male. And so I'm going to create our new pygmy hippo here, Pogo. This is Jason's pygmy hippo extravaganza, so I probably should have a little bit more freedom to create what I want, but I'm sticking to what we have. So we have Pogo here, and then for the species, you can see that there's a drop down to select a species. By default, obviously, those 3 species for the example projects are already in your account. But if you were obviously adding any of the number of species, not one of those 3, you can go ahead and click this add new button and then type in the name of that species, and it'll automatically add it to your account. And so if you added that once, the next animal you created that species will show up here in this drop down list. Since pygmy hippo is already added there, we're going to just select that in our drop down, and then we're going to go ahead and click to add photo, and we're going to add a photo of our pygmy hippo. And then you can add a text description here that you'd be able to view when recording data in the app if you want to describe any sort of characteristics to be able to identify the individuals. And then for the animal type, there's 2 types here, individual and group. And so individual would be any scenario where you can easily identify each individual in your group. If you have a situation like, for instance, think certain taxa like birds, maybe a flock of birds, and like fish or something like that, in those sorts of scenarios for those taxa, you'd probably be looking at group sampling in a lot of cases. So group sampling is you cannot identify the individual, you're recording how many animals in the group or a percentage of the animals in the group are performing a behavior. So a little bit different type of recording there. Since obviously our pygmy hippos are individually identifiable, I'm going to put them as an individual there, and then you'll see that there will be a conditional different section here. So if it's an individual, it asks for their sex, male, female, or unknown. And if it's a group, it'll ask for what the max group count is, or how large your group size is that you're recording. So we're going to leave that as male for Pogo and go ahead and hit save. And so you can see we have Annie and Pogo here. If you want to change their tile focal colors here of how they show up in the app, you can always click this and you can always change what color they're shown as in the app. And you can see you have 2 options here to deactivate and remove. And certainly I've gotten a few questions on what that means because those both sound like very similar terms. So deactivate basically will keep them on your project, but they won't be visible in the app. So after people download updates, that focal animal won't show up as an option to record data anymore. Removing them, you're removing them completely from the project. They still live in your account. So anytime you create a new animal or a new species, they get a record in your account. So they'll still exist, but they'll be off of this project specifically. The reason you'd go for one over the other, so if you added an animal and you recorded data on them, but let's say they passed away or they left your organization, you'd probably go with something like deactivate the animal. You still want their records available in your project, but you don't want them necessarily showing up to record new data on. Obviously, people might accidentally click them, might record some false data there. In the case of you added an animal that you didn't mean to add, that's where you'd probably want to go with remove. So if you accidentally added an animal, you were just exploring, testing the app, and you wanted to take them off of the project, just go ahead and hit remove there. And so you can see our next tab here is habitat map. So we're going to go ahead and click to add a habitat map. And so this is one of the features that is pretty popular in ZooMonitor, to be able to record the space use data of how animals use their habitats. So let me go ahead and add this map for us. Okay, so I have our pygmy hippo habitat at Lincoln Park Zoo, which looks just like the one at Pygmy Hippo Extravaganza. And this is a top-down view basically of our pygmy hippo habitat. And so this is the guest area down here, and this is blue area where the water is, and then there's some land areas in the back of the habitat here. And you can go ahead and hit save. So you just basically need to give it a name, search for the file, hit save. And you can add multiple maps. So if you had a scenario where, like for our pygmy hippos, you might want to add their holding spaces as a separate map on there. If you had animals that were behind the scenes, you can certainly add those as a separate map in there as well. And you can see down here for the recording system, there's a few options here. By default, it's automatically set to a coordinate recording system for your space use data. And what that means is when you plot where the animal's at in your habitat, it's recording it on a 600 by 600 coordinate system. That's obviously a pretty high resolution. Generally for all of our projects at Lincoln Park, I usually just stick with that. We do also have the option to do grid recording. So there were certainly cases previously where people had been using grids to record space use data. And so to keep consistent with their previous methods of maybe when they were transitioning from paper data to ZooMonitor, we wanted to be able to have that ability there for them to be able to do that. Obviously, your grid is not going to be the same resolution as what you're getting with a 600 by 600 coordinate system, but certainly you can check that and then add grids if you would like. Okay, so I have everything set up here for our habitat maps. So the next thing I'm going to do is start adding our behaviors. So there's 3 types of sampling methods here in ZooMonitor, and so I'll kind of walk through each of those. And if you want to, you can also click this Learn More for each of these sampling methods and get more information about them as well there. So I have a little bit of information here showing the what the sampling method is, how it gets calculated in our reporting and stuff like that. Okay, so for all occurrence, basically this is you are recording behaviors anytime that they occur during a session. So I call this sort of our check mark or our tally approach. So if a behavior occurred 10 times during your observation, you have clicked that behavior tile 10 times. You're basically making a record anytime the behavior occurs. Interval sampling is different. Interval sampling is sort of an approximation approach to how you sample behavior. This is over your entire observation duration. Let's say we're watching animals for 10 minutes. You would set a predetermined interval. Let's say we're watching for 10 minutes and we're going to sample them once per minute. You would record what they're doing at those minute intervals there. And that could be any sort of interval you want. Obviously, this project we set up is only 1 minute long. And so we're obviously going to have our intervals be much shorter than that. But you're only really sampling at that specific time point. And that's also known as instantaneous time point sampling, if you're familiar with that term. And this is really helpful when you're looking to do more of an approximation approach. You want to kind of know what's the animal doing sort of as a time budget but not necessarily looking to capture every record of a certain behavior, which you would do with all occurrence sampling here. So all occurrence sampling and interval sampling are two approaches we generally combine actually a lot for our projects at Lincoln Park Zoo. So we might have high priority behaviors like social behaviors, undesirable behaviors that we might not want to miss. And so we record those as all occurrence, but then as a general time budget, we also want to look at like, what are they doing sort of over time, broader picture. And that's where we'll really rely on that interval sampling here. And you'll see as I kind of set up this project here. And then the last one here is continuous. And so this is really the most rigorous sampling method. It's certainly the highest effort as well. And so this is you're recording a full record of what the animal's doing. So you're recording the duration of time they engaged in each behavior that you're looking at in your ethogram. And so obviously that is a perfect replica of the behavior pattern. It's not the approximation that you would get with interval data. However, it is a lot more work. So if you have a species or an animal that is moving frequently, you're having to update, their behavior, maybe switch them from their locomotion, and now they're feeding, foraging, and now they're inactive, and now they're social, and now they're locomoting. You get the picture. You're going to have to obviously be very active in recording that and trying to keep your eyes on the animal at all times to capture any of those behavior changes. So certainly I would say continuous recording has its place if you can record data in that degree of detail. More experienced observers certainly can. There is still going to be limits. So obviously, even if you are able to record data continuously, you're probably not going to be able to do that for multiple animals or multiple types of behavior. So for instance, for us at Lincoln Park, we usually will monitor all the animals in a group at the same time, and we'll sample that. And with interval sampling, it's pretty easy to do. When the iPad will beep, you'll see a screen flash and a beep to tell you that interval occurred. You can just kind of scan left to right in your space and record what all the animals are doing. With continuous, it's certainly a lot harder. And generally, in a lot of those cases, you'll be watching a single focal animal. So it certainly has some impacts on how many animals you can watch, which then has some maybe downstream implications for what sort of behaviors you're looking at. If you're interested in social behaviors, you would capture those for that focal animal, but then you would miss those social behaviors if they're occurring for other animals in the group. So just things to be mindful of when you're thinking about what sampling method to employ. So for this project, we're going to go ahead and add an all occurrence channel. So you can see I just turned that on there. And then I'm going to create a few behaviors here. So believe this is what it's called when our pygmy hippos fan their poop out along the wall, muck spreading. A delightful behavior if you've ever witnessed it. And so there's a few different options here that you can add to this behavior. So you can add a description. So if you have your ethogram with your text definitions, certainly I'd recommend you adding that here. Then you'd be able to pull up that definition in the app. So let's just say something really fancy here. And you'll see when I pull it up in the app, we'll be able to get that description. And then we have our subgroupings. So what subgroupings are is basically in ZooMonitor, all of your behaviors within a channel, which I'll get to in a second to explain what a channel is, but all of your behaviors are going to be organized horizontally on your screen. So if you have an ethogram that has, let's say 40 behaviors, you're going to have 40 tiles on your screen going left to right. So there'll be a lot of horizontal scrolling that you'll have to do to find the specific behavior you're looking to record. If you wanted to break up your ethogram a little bit and have some of those broken into separate rows vertically, you can use subgroups here. And so a case of if you had 40 behaviors in your ethogram, you might be able to easily separate those as solitary behaviors versus social behaviors. That might mean now one row only has, let's say, maybe 25 behaviors, and the other row maybe has 15 behaviors or something like that. So it can help you, be able to just reorganize your screen a little bit to be able to find the behaviors that you're looking for. And the easy way to do that here, if we wanted to do that, you would basically just type whatever your subgroup here is. So if you wanted to be solitary, you just type the word solitary, and for every behavior you want on that subgroup, you would just type that word in there. And behavior modifiers, so these are ways to record additional details of a behavior. So a common example I use is like for inactive behaviors. You might call a behavior inactive, but you might want to put whether the animal is alert or resting, right? Two different sort of inactive behaviors there. So you could do a modifier here and specify that. We'll do that when we create that behavior there. And you can create up to 3 modifiers. And then there's additional modifiers beyond the behavior modifiers. You can also create a social modifier. So if it's a social behavior and you want to record which animal did this behavior occur with, so interactions, you can turn this on and it'll use basically all of the animals that you added to your project. So in this case, that's just 2 animals. That's just Annie and Pogo. So certainly not that complex, but obviously if you're watching a larger social group with more animals, that can certainly be helpful. You can turn on a comment box. So this will just give you a text field to record any sort of notes during your session. And then a space use modifier, which will allow you to plot where the behavior happened. And let's do that for this one here so we can see exactly where are our pygmy hippos muck spreading around their habitat. So we click save. So we've got our one behavior there. Generally, another behavior that I create for us at Lincoln Park is called general comments. And so this is one, I don't add any sort of description or any modifiers, and I just turn on this comment box. And so basically this is a really simple all occurrence behavior. It's not even a behavior of the animals. It's just a way that you can make notes during your session easily. And so I have that behavior added to our project here. And I'm just going to reorganize it and put it above muck spreading. So it's the first tile we see there when we're recording data. Okay, so for interval data here, we are going to be recording, so this is a 1-minute observation. Let's record 3 intervals. So every 20 seconds, the screen will flash and the app will beep. Let's go ahead and hit save. And then we're going to create a recording channel. So what is a channel? So channels are basically mutually exclusive categories of behavior, if you will, in ZooMonitor lingo. So generally, if you're recording, a full ethogram of the behaviors an animal's doing, you would probably have that as one channel. We certainly do that here. But there are other channels you might create. So for us at Lincoln Park, we also record shade use, for the animals. Are they in the sun or are they in the shade? That's obviously mutually exclusive from the behavior. They could be walking and in the sun or walking and in the shade. We might record their posture. You might also create a channel to record their height in the habitat because the space use data that you'll see is a top-down map. So you're really recording the XY, but if you have animals that are using sort of that vertical space, you could create a channel there with different height categories and record that as well. So certainly different ways you can add channels here. So I'm just going to call this something called general behavior. Subject type, again, same as the subjects you added to the project. So this is for Annie and Pogo, our individuals. So we're going to go ahead and hit save there. And you'll see once I create that channel, it automatically puts me inside that channel here. So you'll see the channel name is general behavior. If you want to go back and look at your list of channels, you can click that go back button. And this is the table of all of your channels here. And so you can see with this general behavior, this is not a behavior, this is a channel, remember? And it lists here how many behaviors are within that channel. So if you click that, we can go back to the screen here and we're going to go ahead and add some behaviors. If you are completely new to behavior monitoring and looking, for some resources to help you get started in defining behaviors, we do have on our support site our master ethogram. So I'll go to our support site here and show you this. So this is our support site here. If you go to the resource library and then scroll down, you'll see Lincoln Park Zoo's master ethogram here. This is the ethogram that we use at Lincoln Park Zoo. It's a standardized ethogram that we use for all the species. So you'll see it's not a particularly species specific in terms of how we define behaviors. It's really a general description of behavior that can work across multiple species and multiple taxa there. But certainly you can download that as a resource to help you get started. Okay, so for this interval channel, we're going to create some behaviors here. So I'm just going to add the categories we use at Lincoln Park Zoo. So I'm going to have inactive, And just to kind of show what those modifiers look like, I'm going to create a few options here. So I'm going to create that alert and rest modifiers here. The category name, that's really just any word you want to put there. It's not showing up in your export at the time of this video. And so this is really just something that just shows up when you're on your recording screen in the app. And then the modifier list is in here. And then you can go ahead and hit save. So we've got inactive listed there. And click feeding foraging. I'll create that one. So these are the behavior categories. So our ethogram, you'll see in our master ethogram, we lump into a series of categories to make it a little bit easier to analyze the data. One of the challenges that you'll face if you do have, a very large ethogram with something like 30 to 40 behaviors is when you start analyzing that, it's really hard to look at behaviors changing when you're trying to look at 30 to 40 behaviors and really make clear sense of that. And so kind of an easy approach there is to create these sort of categories here that have the specific behaviors you're recording maybe will fall under those categories. In this case, I'm using the categories as our behaviors here. But this is helpful because then you can kind of lump your behaviors into maybe meaningful units. So if we wanted to look at just how much time are they feeding foraging, you could have those categories already set for those behaviors in your ethogram. And then it's really important when you're creating your ethogram to make sure it is mutually exclusive and exhaustive. So you'll see I'm adding a few extra behaviors here to get that coverage. So an ethogram should always be defined objectively, not subjectively in how you describe the behavior. It should be the appearance of it, not the motivations that you might think the animals are putting into the behavior. The second aspect, it should be exhaustive. So it should cover all the behaviors an animal could do. That's important because you don't want to leave blanks when you're recording data, right? So if I didn't add other and not visible, basically what would happen is anytime the animal walked out of view, I would just leave a blank for that interval. The problem is then you wouldn't know, was the animal out of view or did I just miss recording that interval, right? You wouldn't be able to distinguish those. You really should never leave blanks when you're recording data. And so that exhaustive aspect, that criteria for an ethogram usually means you would need to add an other category or other behavior and then a not visible behavior there. And the last one is that it should be mutually exclusive as well. And so when you're recording observations, you're not recording multiple behaviors. If it's the interval recording here, you're not recording multiple behaviors at the same interval. So an animal, of course, can be walking and feeding at the same time, but you would have to pick, do you record walking or do you record feeding? And that comes down to a priority that you would set for your project. So having those priorities in advance, which categories are the most important? Generally for us at Lincoln Park, we put something like feeding, foraging above locomotion. And what I've even done on some projects is I've reorganized the behaviors based on the categories, based on those priorities. So for instance, our undesirable behaviors, they might be the highest priority. And then your next highest priority, you would list those behaviors there. And so that can make it a little bit easier on the screen. The challenge is those high priority behaviors are hopefully, if it's undesirable, some of the rarest behaviors are not going to be that common. And so it's always a balance of, do you want the easy behaviors to record to be the most common ones that you're going to click on, or do you want them to be sort of that priority? You can also add that priority when you're defining the behavior. So obviously here you could add in sort of a priority, a number if you have it, for your behavior as well in the description field. So that way when your observers are recording data and they're wondering, is this behavior more important than this behavior? They can refer back to that and then get that information. And you'll see we don't have any definitions I added to this and subgroups, but if you did, they would show up here. So we have that one channel created. You can create multiple interval and multiple continuous channels. So we'll create a continuous channel here really quick. You can only create one all occurrence channel. So that is a key difference here. Interval channels and continuous channels are that mutually exclusive, exhaustive aspect that I mentioned earlier. All occurrence behaviors are really not mutually exclusive in any way, right? So the behavior we recorded here, muck spreading, if I recorded that 3 times and then I recorded general comments twice, I made a couple notes during the session, obviously recording those couple notes doesn't impact at all my recording of muck spreading, because anytime the behavior occurs, you're making that note that it occurred. So this isn't mutually exclusive, but the interval behaviors and continuous are. And so you'll see that in the app, when you have your channel set up, you can only have one tile active for an interval, or if you're recording continuous, you can only have one behavior active for an interval and one behavior active for your continuous channel there. But for all occurrence, you could click one all occurrence behavior and then immediately click another all occurrence behavior, and that's completely valid. So for continuous, let's go ahead and I'm just calling these channels pretty basic things, continuous behavior, save, and then I'm going to create a behavior. I should also mention that you might be wondering what this add from ethogram is here. So if you want to create all of your behaviors within a project like I'm doing here for this demo, you can certainly click create behavior, create all your behaviors right there. If you had a standardized ethogram like I mentioned to you that we use at Lincoln Park, you can also add those here in your study resources section. You can add your behaviors there. And then if you had them listed there, you can click add from ethogram. You would have an ethogram listed here, and then you can basically pull all of those behaviors directly in. So if you're creating multiple projects with the same behaviors, that's certainly a very easy way to do it if you are using that sort of standardized ethogram across your projects there. So you just add them once to ZooMonitor, and then you'd basically just use this and check them to add them into your project. And let's say for our pygmy hippos, we wanted to know specifically how much time they spend swimming. And we're going to record this in detail. So we're going to record the duration. We're also going to add another behavior called no swimming. And the reason for that is how the data gets calculated for your continuous channel. So for your continuous channel, it's calculating a % of time for that channel. So if we only had one behavior that was swimming, and let's say swimming occurred, this is a 1-minute observation here, let's say it occurred for 20 seconds, you'd only be recording this channel if you just had the one behavior for 20 seconds. So when ZooMonitor calculates your % of time, it would say 20 seconds divided by 20 seconds, which is always going to be 100%. So if you've seen that when you've been setting up your projects with continuous recording and testing out the app there, that's probably what's going on there. So you do want to have sort of a counter behavior there to offset that. And so when we start this observation, we're going to score no swimming for our pygmy hippo. And then when they swim, you would toggle between the two. And so that way, that means every time it's calculating the % of time, that denominator is always going to be our 1 minute approximately for the session there. So I mentioned here that it's % of time for continuous. Interval is also % of time and how that gets calculated. So it'll look at how many intervals get recorded out of the total number of intervals that were recorded, how many intervals of a behavior, specific behavior out of the total intervals. So if you, for instance, in this case, we have 3 intervals, not many. We're only watching for a minute. But let's say we missed one of these intervals and we only recorded 2. And let's say during those 2 intervals, we recorded inactive, right? So we have 2. There was only 2 intervals recorded. So it would say 2 out of 2, and it would be 100% of the time they were inactive during that session. And so it gets calculated on a per session basis. So it's automatically going to adjust if you are missing an interval. It'll remove those intervals and it'll adjust for that. And then the last one here, just to kind of work through all of them, is all occurrence. So this is calculating a rate of time. So it's going to look at how many times the behavior occurred that you recorded out of the total session duration. So if this is a 1-minute session, how many times did muck spreading occur per minute is what it would be calculating there. So a few different ways it gets calculated. And like I said, those things are available here in that Learn More if you want to refer back to that. And then for the observers, you're going to need to make sure to add observers to your projects. So this project wouldn't show up for me until I add my name to the project. So you can see I just added my name there to the project. So now it'll show up. And then the last tab here, we're almost done creating this project, is session questions. So this is a way you can add additional things you might want to record. So for us, a lot of times we record, temperature in a lot of cases. So let me just add that one here. You could record the temperature during the observation. So this is a question that you would answer before starting the session. So these are sort of any of those independent variables you might want to capture. Crowd size, that's another common one here. And you can also specify this as a list. So let's say we have 0, 1 to 10, and let's say greater than 10. You just have 3 choices there. You want to separate them, so please separate using commas. So it's going to have 3 choices showing up there in the app, 0, 1 to 10, and greater than 10 there. And you can also set a default list value if you want to do that. So I have a few questions there. So I think we're at a good spot with this project. We're done creating it. Now let's jump back into the app and let's record a quick session on it. So you'll see I'll click Select Observer here. My name is showing up. But if you remember back earlier, we created an observer profile for Tasha Wierzel. She's not showing up here. Any change you make in admin, you need to download those updates to the app for them to show up here. So the admin, you need online Wi-Fi access. You need to be online for that. All of that is directly online. The app can run offline. And so you need to make sure that you're downloading those updates into your cache of your web browser there. And so if you click that download updates button, you'll see it'll quickly give you that progress indicator. And now when we hit select observer, you'll see Tasha's name will show up there. And so this is our app recording screen. So you can see our projects are in here. We have our surveys. You can upload your data from here or within each project or survey. And then there's also some settings here as well. And then you can jump to admin or support from there as well. And then, of course, our menu is up here. And so you can pull up and look at the menu. So in the project, we're going to go to projects really quick and look at that project we just created, our Pygmy Hippo monitoring project. So you can see it's showing up here. It wouldn't have shown up until I clicked that download update. So if I had just signed in really quick, I went to the screen, the example projects would be the only one signing up. So you really need to remember to click download updates after you make any changes there in admin. So this project is showing up. We're going to go ahead and click to start a new session. So this is basically just showing who your subjects are on that project, the method set up, and then the duration. You can also view the ethogram. So if you're training people, you can pull this up and show people the ethogram for the behaviors that are on your project. And then you can also pull up the habitat map. So like I mentioned earlier, this is the water region for our Pygmy hippos. These are deeper areas, the dark blue. This is a lighter area, and then this is the land area. If you're curious to see how I actually created this Pygmy hippo map, I actually have another demo of creating habitat maps. And I specifically went through this example here of our Pygmy hippo habitat. So you can certainly check that out on our YouTube channel. So we're going to go ahead and click new session. So I have Annie and Pogo listed here. And then I'm going to put a temperature. Let's say it's 75. It's currently January in Chicago, so that is really optimistic, wishful thinking. And then you can click a crowd size here. So let's say it's 1 to 10 people. You can add notes down here as well. So these are notes that will show up in your export. You can add these now, or you can edit the session afterwards and then add notes. And like I said, with that general comments behavior we added, you can also add notes during your session too. So let's go ahead and hit start session. We're going to score for Annie. So you can see I clicked her behavior tile there. So we have our 2 animals here, Annie and Pogo. And like I said, our continuous behavior, our first thing is we're going to score no swimming. Neither of them are swimming right now. But let's say we just saw Pogo muck spreading, and we can say where he was doing it. So he's over here on land at the moment, so we can click that, hit save. You can see up here it's counting down, and so that was our first interval right there. And so for Annie, let's score her. She is inactive, she is alert. And let's say she is over here, and Pogo is now walking, and he is, let's say, over here. And you can see it's counting down. We've got our second interval here, so we can click Annie up at the top. Let's say Annie moved up to the land area. Let's say she's feeding over here. And let's say Pogo just jumped in and started swimming. So let's change him to swimming. And then let's put him locomotion down here in the water. And that was our last interval there. So this is our 3 of 3. Please remember to score this last interval. Certainly some new users do forget to do that at times. And they, once it says save session, they'll click that. There is still one interval left to score here. So we're going to click Annie one last time. And we're going to say now she's walking. And let's say she's up on the land area. And Pogo, he's now inactive. He's alert. So these are those modifiers we set up for that behavior. And let's say he's stopped right here. So you can see we've easily recorded those behaviors on this top-down map. And then this is our interval behavior channel, our continuous channel, and then our all occurrence channel. And I mentioned earlier adding those definitions. So you can see those here. If you click that, you can pull up those definitions at any time for a behavior. And then you can also, with the ellipses up here for an individual, you can pull up and view their picture and any description that you add to them to help your observers be able to identify your animals. So we'll go ahead and hit save there. And so you can see this blue dot on the tile means we have a pending session on the device in the app. You want to make sure to upload those sessions. So right now it's only existing in my web browser right here. It hasn't actually gone to the ZooMonitor server. I haven't uploaded it yet. So you can click the behavior and you can upload it right here. So go ahead and hit upload, and you'll see it'll clear off the device at that point, and then it'll be uploaded to your account. And the last thing I wanted to kind of show really quick here is the settings screen, since there's some kind of important information on here to cover. So this is where you'll see your app settings, what the current version that you're using. You'll see the cache, so the app cache and image cache, how many files. If ever this looks, this isn't adding up, if you don't have the same number of files out of the number there, if it's 0 out of 145, for instance, you'll probably need to reinstall your app. So just take a look there if things aren't looking right in the app. That's certainly one of the things to check there. And then you can also set an icon here, and you can probably get a guess of my dorky sensibilities here of the different icon choices. So I'm going to make my icon our lovely little X-Wing here and click save. And so just a little fun aspect here now in the app that you can see the icon showing up for you and for the other users that, other observers that you have in your account. So hopefully that was a really fast overview kind of the setting up your first project and recording data. If you ever have any questions about ZooMonitor, you can always feel free to email me at zoomonitor.org. Thanks for watching. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like that video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel to be notified when we release more videos. If you have any questions about ZooMonitor, you can always feel free to contact us at ZooMonitor@lpzoo.org. Thanks.